Hello, my name is Aiden Keefe. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and today I'll be showing our results of the acoustic streaming in the cochlea. I'll be showing, first starting off by showing the hearing apparatus, as well as the acousto-mechanical transduction and our cochlear channel model. I'll be stating the objective and going through the acoustic streaming, the equations of fluid motion, our controlling parameters, the pressure results, the boundary conditions, and lastly, our acoustic streaming result. This is a model of the hearing apparatus. Figure A shows the result of air conduction. So sound enters through the tympanic membrane and vibration is communicated to the cochlea through the oval window, and the vibration is then sent out through the round window. In contrast, bone conduction causes the cochlea to undergo a series of compressions, and vibration flows out of the oval and round windows. In this work, we'll be focusing on the streaming as a result of bone conduction. So this is a folded view of the cochlea experiencing bone conduction proposed by Bekesi in 1932. The upper region is called the scala vestibuli, and the lower region is the scala tympani. These regions are connected by a small gap called the helicotrema. The compression of the cochlear shell causes fluid displacement at the oval and round windows. And due to the incompressibility of the fluid, this volume velocity going in must equal the volume velocity going out. In our problem geometry, we unroll the cochlea and model it as a two-dimensional fluid-filled channel. We are interested in when the height h naught is much less than the length L naught. The motion of basilar membrane, shown here, is dependent upon the pressure differential across the channel. The velocity of motion of the basilar membrane is capital V. The axial velocity is denoted by U naught, a reference velocity, A naught, a scaled non-dimensional amplitude, and alpha, which is a degree of asymmetry. The deformation of the cochlear shell is represented by this value here. So our objective was to evaluate the vibration of the partition due to fluid motion in the cochlear channel, and we model it as a linear harmonic acoustic part as well as a nonlinear acoustic streaming part. So from Bekesi's model, we can observe the acoustic streaming when the basilar membrane is vibrated. The significance of this model is that it shows that there's a time average solution as well as an oscillatory part to the streaming in the cochlea. So these are our equations of fluid motion. U vector represents the particle velocity, T is time, and P is the pressure. We wrote the equations in terms of the Strohel number S and the Reynolds number R. 1 over S is equal to a reference velocity U naught over the angular frequency times the length. 1 over R is equal to the kinematic viscosity over the angular frequency times length squared. Our second fluid motion equation is to show that mass is conserved. Our controlling parameters are the viscous forces R and the inertial forces S. We plotted 1 over S as a function of 1 over R. The Rayleigh solution in green shows the relationship between R and S when they are of the same magnitude, and the moderate streaming, shown in red, shows a relationship of R over S squared equal to an order of 1. And since we are interested in the streaming when 1 over S is small, we'll be focusing on this region here. Next, we substitute an epsilon, which is equal to 1 over S, into the conservation of momentum equation when R over S squared is equal to an order of 1. We have a term of order epsilon on the left-hand side and a term of order epsilon squared on the right-hand side. Rs is the streaming Reynolds number and equals R over S squared. So we're interested in the streaming as epsilon goes to 0. We wrote the equation of the pressure and vector velocity outside the wall boundary layer as an asymptotic expansion in terms of epsilon with an error of epsilon to the fourth. So this is our acoustic pressure at the 0th order of epsilon. Our pressure is a function of the vertical position y, the horizontal position x, as well as the vertical velocity v naught, and g naught is Green's function. The pressure differential across the length of the channel is equal to the impedance times the velocity v naught. And the impedance of the bachelor membrane is a function of mass m, the stiffness k, and the resistance r of the bachelor membrane. And note how k and r change exponentially with horizontal position. So this is our acoustic result. The first plot shows the vertical velocity as a function of position along the cochlea at different frequencies. So this rightmost peak here occurs at 0.25 kilohertz. As frequency increases, the position of peak velocity decreases. So and we're focusing on the pressure at 1 kilohertz shown here, and note how it occurs at x equals negative 0.5. And as a consequence, there is a pressure differential. So this is a magnitude of the pressure as a function of position down here. And as a consequence of the peak occurring at x equals negative 0.5, there's a pressure differential at x equals negative 0.5 and x equals 0.5. Also note that the pressure varies with respect to vertical position. This is the nonlinear acoustic streaming part at the third order of epsilon. U1 is the two-dimensional time average vector velocity. P3 is the pressure, and RS is the streaming Reynolds number. The boundary conditions are evaluated through asymptotic matching and are shown here. So the time averaged horizontal velocity is denoted by U1 bar. It depends on the complex amplitude U. The asterisk denotes that the complex conjugate, and the time averaged vertical velocity is V1 bar. It depends on the bachelor membrane displacement H, as well as U naught, which is shown here. So we graph the streaming slip velocities at y equals 0 along the length of the cochlea. The green line is the horizontal component, and the red line is the vertical component, and are found at 1 kilohertz and an alpha value of 0.5. So in order to find our numerical streaming solutions, the horizontal and slip velocities are scaled to their dimensional value through a factor of U naught over S, and the streaming Reynolds number is set to 1. So in our numerical analysis, a leaking wall boundary is used at the lower wall and acts as a perforated wall. A no slip, no penetration condition is used for the remaining 3 walls. So we formed our dimensional acoustic streaming result using COMSOL. The lower figure shows the magnitude of the streaming flow, and these two figures are just close-ups of the eddies. And the first vortex is centered at x equals negative 1.5 centimeters and rotates counterclockwise, and the second vortex is centered at x equals 1.75 centimeters and rotates clockwise. And note that the amplitude of the first vortex is greater than the second due to damping of the inside the cochlea. So in summary, we analyzed the bachelor membrane excitation through channel deformation. We derived boundary conditions used to capture time average behavior. We demonstrated how frequency-dependent streaming affects peak velocity. As the frequency increases, the position of peak velocity decreases. And lastly, we presented spatially localized acoustic streaming results. Thank you.